against Moses. Then it was going to be Aaron and Miriam. Remember, the brother and sister of Moses stood up and said, Moses, you're taking too much. They said, we're equal to you. We also speak for God. Well, in chapter 16, we're going to have some others that basically do the same thing.
Miriam, she became leprous.
She became leprous, and then Aaron ultimately will die. We're going to see that here in a couple of chapters. But notice chapter 16, we have a man by the name of Korah, and he's described as being a Levite. So he's of the priestly tribe, but he's not of the priestly family. Remember, it's going to be Aaron's family that are going to be priests. And so not every Levite was going to be a priest, but all the Levites had some function around the tabernacle. Remember, they were to be the ones that took care of the tabernacle and set it up and that kind of thing. Well, Korah is among them. And so you have Korah, then you also have two others named Dathan and Abiram. And they're introduced as being Reubenites. They're from the tribe of Reuben. So we got three people here. And we're told they become insolent. What does the word insolent mean? Upset. They become troublemakers. Rebellious. That's what insolent means. Stubborn in a way. Notice they become insolent. They rise up against Moses. And notice it's not going to just be the three. There's also going to be 250 Israelite men. Do what? Prominent. Yeah, these are people that are well known. It says well-known community leaders. It says they had been appointed members of the council. What do you think the council is? Remember when Moses' father-in-law showed up? It's the 70, but it's more than that because there's 250. I think these are the ones that Moses' father-in-law said you need to appoint. He said appoint leaders of hundreds and fifties and tens. Let them be the judges among the people. Well, that's who these people are. These are these leaders of the people, so they're going to rise up as well. Verse 3, we're told that they come as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You've gone too far." I want you to remember those words because they're going to be used again. You've gone too far. They say the whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. So why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly? In other words, Moses, you're taking too much authority. You're taking too much on. We all share in this, they say. That's basically what Aaron and Miriam had said in chapter 12. They said, Moses, we're equal to you. Well, now you have all of these others saying the same thing.
But God gave Moses the authority.
God did. Yeah. He didn't give it to the rest. And so Moses recognizes that. What does Moses do in verse 4? Falls down on his face. He did the same thing with Miriam and Aaron. That reminds us of how Moses was described in chapter 12. He was described as meek. The meekest man or the humblest man that ever lived. Moses wasn't looking to take all this power on himself. Remember when God first came to him at the burning bush and said, I want you to lead my people out of Egypt, Moses said what? I'm not the man. I can't do it. He said, go find somebody else. So Moses wasn't looking to do this himself. Yeah. Well, if his attitude's humility, what's their attitude? Arrogance, prideful, what else? They're jealous. This comes down to jealousy. They want what God has given to him. So he falls down. Then he tells them, verse 5, he says to Korah and the followers, he says, in the morning the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy, and he will have that person come near to him. The man who he chooses will cause to come near to him. He says, you, Korah, and all your followers are to do this. Take censers, and tomorrow morning put burning coals and incense in them before the Lord, and the man the Lord chooses will be the one who is holy. You Levites have gone too far. Notice that in line there. You've gone too far. They accused him of going too far. Now Moses is saying, You're the ones that have gone too far. Now, basically, the implication here is I think God has spoken to Moses to tell him what's going to happen, because Moses seems to already have a plan of what's going to take place. We don't have the conversation between God and Moses. What we hear is Moses. And what Moses tells him to do, he says, tomorrow morning, God's going to choose between you, between me, and everybody's going to see who is the one that's the leader here. The one that's holy, that's the term that he uses. He tells him to take a censer. What is a censer? Verse 6. Yeah, basically a pan. It was a metal dish of some sort. And that's what they would carry coal. The burning coals they would take from the fire that was always burning. They would take it to the tabernacle, to the altar. They would sometimes put incense in it and burn it as well. So that's what this censer is. And apparently every one of them had one. You know, every family had their own censer, because it was used not just for the tabernacle, it would have been used for meals. That's how you would bring the coals to your fire. Well, it's Levites and Reubenites. Korah is a Levite, but Dathan and Abiram are Reubenites. Well, they may or may not. I think they're just a sampling of everybody. Some of them would have been Levites, some from other tribes. So that's Moses' instruction. He continues, verse 8, he tells Korah directly. He says, now listen, you Levites. Remember, Korah's a Levite. He says, isn't it enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the Israelite community and brought you near to himself to do the work at the Lord's tabernacle and to stand before the community and minister to them? He basically says, Korah, God's already blessed you and the people with you. You already have a wonderful position. He says, you're the closest ones to God. And he's basically saying, you're taking that for granted. Verse 10, he says, he has brought you and all of your fellow Levites near himself, but now you're trying to get the priesthood too. Remember, of the Levites, it's only Aaron's family that's the priest. The rest of them were just workers around the tabernacle and so forth. And so that's what he's saying. Now you want the priesthood too. You want it all, instead of accepting what God has given you. Verse 11, it is against the Lord that you and all your followers have banded together. Who is Aaron that you should grumble against him? You know, so they had come to Moses and Aaron, and they were saying, you've gone too far. But Moses says you've gone against who? You're actually sinning against God. Not against Moses and Aaron. They're just men that God has chosen. Well, then Moses summons the others. You know, verse 8, he had summoned Korah. Now he's summoning Dathan and Abiram. Remember, they're the other two that were leading this rebellion. They are brothers. Yeah, both sons of Eliab. And they say in unison, we will not come. Now think about that. Moses said, come. And they said, we refuse to come. Then verse 13, they say, isn't it enough that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness? Now think about that. Where have they just come from? Egypt. They're calling Egypt the land flowing with milk and honey. They were slaves in Egypt. That goes back to chapter 11. Remember when they were demanding meat, they said, we had all of this wonderful food to eat in Egypt for free. So they had forgotten then, they're forgetting now. They're equating Egypt to the land flowing with milk and honey. But what's the land flowing with milk and honey according to God? It's Canaan. It's the promised land. It's where God is bringing them. But they've reversed it. At the end of verse 13, they say, now you want to lord it over us. Moreover, you haven't brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, or given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Do you want to treat these men like slaves? And then they say again, no, we will not come. In other words, basically they're saying, Moses, this was all a lie. You promised us all this. Remember, God's the one that promised them. But they're focusing it on Moses the man. They say, you promised all this, and now we're just out here in this awful place. They thought it should have already happened. Right.
It could have already happened if they had went in like God said, and they said, no, they're too
Yeah. Had they been faithful, it would have already happened.
Yeah.
You know, so not only are they jealous, they're impatient. Impatient with Moses, but ultimately it's impatient with God. They're not grateful. So there's lots of things going on that's fueling their thoughts here.
They're not equating the promise with God. They're not seeing the big picture.
That's right.
They're not open-minded. They're seeing what is selfish.
That happens to us, doesn't it? We get so focused on our own issues. You know, human nature hadn't changed. You know, we can relate to these people. Well, what's Moses' reaction in 15?
Angry.
He's not just angry, he's what? He's very angry. He was angry before, and now he's very angry. And especially when they refuse to come. That's what he's angry about it. So he says, do not accept their offering. I have not taken so much as a donkey from them, nor have I wronged any of them. I think he's saying a couple of things. He's saying this to God, don't accept their offering. In other words, God, don't be merciful to them.
He's done.
He is done with these people. You know, earlier, you remember when the people were sinning, Moses was the first one to tell God, you're merciful. Now he says, God, don't accept their offering. And then he defends himself. He says, I've not taken as much as a donkey from them, nor have I wronged any of them. Because that's what they had accused Moses of. You've gone too far. In other words, you're enriching yourself. And Moses now is defending himself to God, which God knew the truth. He said, I hadn't taken anything from them. You know, I've not abused my privilege at all. Well, now Moses is going to talk to Korah again. Remember, Korah is one of the Levites. Verse 16, he says, you and all your followers are to appear before the Lord tomorrow. You and they and Aaron. So this goes back to actually what he said in verse 5. He wants everybody to come together. And God is then going to demonstrate who is right. Verse 17, he says, each man is to take a censer. Remember the metal pan or fire pan. They're to put incense in it. We're reminded there's 250 censers. Why are there 250 censers? There's 250 rebels. So every man is going to have a censer, and that represents their family, not just themselves. So they're going to present it before the Lord. Basically, that means they're to come to the tabernacle. Tent of meeting, that's where this is going to take place. He says, you and Aaron are to present your censers also. The you is Korah. So Korah, you're going to bring one. Aaron, you're going to bring one. Verse 18, so each of them did this. They took a censer, put burning coals in it, and stood with Moses and Aaron at the entrance to the tent of meeting. When Korah had gathered all his followers in opposition to them at the entrance of the tent of meeting, the glory of the Lord appeared to the entire assembly. What's the glory of the Lord? It's the pillar of cloud by day, pillar of fire by night. So the cloud comes. Just kind of imagine the optics of that. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron. He tells them, separate yourselves from this assembly. In other words, get away from the rebels. So that's Moses and Aaron. They're to get away. And he says, so I can put an end to them all at once. So basically, get some distance between you and them. What do Moses and Aaron do? Verse 22, they fall on their face, they cry out, O God, the God who gives breath to all living things, will you be angry with the entire assembly when only one man sins? So remember what Moses had already said about Dathan and Abiram. He said, don't accept their offering. But with Korah and these others, he's going to show some patience. Part of that might be Moses and Aaron are actually cousins of Korah. Korah is a Levite. So it may be that he feels a family tie with them, but he also may recognize, okay, at least they came. Because Dathan and Abiram didn't come. We're going to deal with them in a moment. Remember, they refused to come. At least Korah is willing to come, and so I think that may be why Moses is saying, have some mercy here. But what does God say in verse 23?
They're telling them to get away from them. Get away from their dwellings.
Okay,
Including Korah.
all three of them now he includes it. So God says, no, this is time. So he tells them to move away. So verse 25, Moses got up. He went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. He warned the assembly, move back from the tents of these wicked men. Do not touch anything belonging to them, or you will be swept away because of all their sins. So what Moses is doing is going before all the people and telling the people to move away. Not just he and Aaron, but Moses is telling everybody now, you leave these tents alone. And it was the tents with all their family. It's not just these men. Their families are with them too. Well, verse 27, the people listen. It says they moved away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Dathan and Abiram had come out and were standing with their wives, children, and little ones at the entrances to their tents. What do you think that described? What kind of attitude?
How dare you?
Well, kind of a how dare you, defiance.
The families coming to their tents.
These men are having their families stand with them.
Well, behind every man is a good woman.
Could be that. It could suggest that the whole families are in on the rebellion. It could just suggest how Dathan and Abiram are running their families. They're forcing their families to be with them. We've seen that at times, haven't we? Where a head of a household might be the stubborn one. And they refuse to let their family even come to God. I think there's some of that. Moses then speaks. This is 28. He says, this is how you will know that the Lord has sent me to do all these things, and it's not my idea. If these men die a natural death and suffer the fate of all mankind, then the Lord has not sent me. What do you think a natural death is? It could be old age, all the things that we die from today. So that's going to be the test. If it's a natural death, then the Lord has not sent me. In other words, they have a point. Korah and Dathan and Abiram, they're right. But then he says, verse 30, if the Lord brings about something totally new, and then he suggests what that could be. The earth opens its mouth and swallows them with everything that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the realm of the dead. Then you will know that these men have treated the Lord with contempt. So Moses says if something totally unusual happens, and that unusual thing that would happen would be an earthquake. And not just any earthquake, the earth is literally going to open up and swallow all of these people.
This is unprecedented.
Unprecedented. You've never seen it before. Well, notice the answer, verse 31. It says, as soon as he finished saying these things, what happened? The ground opened. There wasn't any delay at all. Just imagine visualizing all this, seeing all this. As soon as Moses finished speaking, it opened up. And all those associated with Korah, together with their possessions, they went down alive into the realm of the dead, and with everything they owned. The earth closed over them, and they perished and were gone from the community. At their cries, all the Israelites around them fled, shouting, the earth is going to swallow us too. So just imagine seeing that. Now, we read this, and maybe we think, well, how could God do this with all of the innocent? And that's what we would call the women and children. We're not the judge. We don't know what the innocence was. It may have been the whole families were involved in this. May have been God's way of making his point, too.
The consequences of sin sometimes affect other people.
Definitely.
So it's when you have them saying, well, we're not going to do this anymore, the consequence of their sin cost their family their life. And that doesn't mean it cost them
Sure.
their salvation, but it cost them their lives.
And that is a lesson here. The consequences of our actions. They can be far-reaching and affect those that are innocent. But all the people, they get the point. The earth is going to swallow us too. So they you could say they got religion very, very quickly. And they fled. They're afraid. Well, that's not the only thing that happens. Then notice verse 35. Fire came out from the Lord. And where does the fire? What does the fire do? Consumes the 250 men. So the earthquake apparently affected Korah, and I think Dathan and Abiram too, although they're not mentioned in that paragraph, but they were mentioned earlier as being with Korah. But then the 250 men, they're not spared either. Fire is going to consume them. Then God speaks again. He says to Moses, tell Eleazar, son of Aaron. By the way, which son of Aaron was Eleazar? Why is he the third? Okay. Nadab and Abihu have already died. So Eleazar is the next one. And Eleazar is a good guy, by the way. We'll find out more about him later. Well, Moses tells Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, to remove the censers from the charred remains and scatter the coals some distance away, for the censers are holy. In other words, go rescue the censers. But the people that bore them, they've paid the penalty. That's what verse 38 says. The censers of the men who sinned at the cost of their lives. Hammer the censers into sheets to overlay the altar, for they were presented before the Lord and have become holy. Let them be a sign to the Israelites. So he says, go get the censers, melt them down, put it over the altar. That's the altar that was in front of the tabernacle. And it's to be a sign. How is that sign going to work? It's a reminder. Yeah. You come to the tabernacle, you're going to, hopefully the people will remember. He's a consuming fire. Yeah. He means business, doesn't he? So Eleazar's going to do that. That's verse 39. Verse 41, we'll jump up ahead. We got the Israelites complaining again. It's all of them now, notice. So not just 250, it's all of them. What's their complaint? You killed the Lord's people.
Well, the 250 men were prominent men.
They were.
They were leaders.
Well, they were respected, I'm sure. Looked up to. But notice, the people haven't quite made the connection. God's the one that judged them. But they're blaming Moses and Aaron. You did this. So it makes us wonder how stubborn they can be. You would hope that if we saw these things directly, we would get the point. And we wouldn't have to question anything. But again, human nature is pretty consistent. Makes you wonder what our attitude would be. So they complain. So verse 42, the assembly gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron. So it's not a friendly gathering. They're there to oppose him. We're told suddenly the cloud covered it and the glory of the Lord appeared. So God is going to be there in this midst too. Then we're told 43, Moses and Aaron went to the front of the tent of meeting, and the Lord said to Moses, get away from this assembly so I can put an end to them at once. So he said the same thing to him the day before about Dathan and Abiram and Korah. Now he says this about everybody. What do Moses and Aaron do? They fall face down. Then Moses said to Aaron, it seems like there's a break there that we're not told. I think God probably communicated with Moses between 45 and 46. Because Moses then gives some instructions to Aaron. He says, take your censer, put incense in it, along with the burning coals from the altar, and hurry to the assembly and make atonement for them. Wrath has come out from the Lord, and the plague has started. So whatever God was going to do, he's already started. This is similar to Exodus 32 when Moses confronts the people about the golden calf. And we're told then that the plague goes out from God, and he tells the Levites at the time, he says, take your sword and go through the camp and basically take out anybody that was a part of the sin of worshiping the calf. And remember, they go through the nation, and there's thousands that die at their sword. Well, now what Moses is telling Aaron to do is not take a sword, but take your fire and go through the crowd. Verse 47, Aaron did this, we're told. He ran into the midst of the assembly. The plague had already started, but Aaron offered the incense and made atonement for them. So the incense is going to be basically a sacrifice or a plea to God to stop. Verse 48 is powerful. It says, he, Aaron, stood between the living and the dead, and the plague stopped. So God recognizes what Aaron's doing. He stood between the living and the dead. That's a description of what Jesus did for us. He died on the cross. He stood between death and life. And you and I have benefited from that. We have life from that.
It's kind of powerful because you think sin, well, we have Jesus. When you go back to this, it makes your sin seems so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we kind of water down things, don't we? We don't see the seriousness of it, and that a lot of that is because of God's grace, because it's covered us. And so we don't think about it often. You know, in these days, they saw the sacrifices, they saw the blood, they saw the death. And that's one reason we look at these stories, because then it reminds us of these things too. Well, notice there are some that die. How many die from the plague? 14,700. Okay. Kind of put that in perspective, we've got about 24,000 people that live in Gallup. That'd be over half of the people of Gallup. So a significant number of dead. Then we're told Aaron returns to where Moses is after the plague stopped, but that's not going to be the end of this. Chapter 17 continues here, the story. Moses then, actually the Lord, we're told, spoke to Moses. He said, speak to the Israelites and get 12 staffs from them, one from the leader of each of their ancestral tribes. So chapter 16, it was going to be the censer the men were going to bring, and God was going to indicate who was holy. Now it's going to be a staff, one from each tribe. God then says, write the name of each man on his staff. In other words, that way you can't confuse them. The name is going to be there. Verse 3, we're told on the staff of Levi, write Aaron's name, for there must be one staff for the head of each ancestral tribe. Then they're to place these in the tent of meeting, that's the tabernacle, in front of the Ark of the Covenant. So that's going to be in the most holy room, the inner sanctum of the tabernacle. Then God says, the staff belonging to the man I choose will sprout. What does it mean that it will sprout? Come back to life. You know, a staff is a piece of dead wood that had been cut a long time ago. You know, I imagine these ancestral staffs had been around a long time. Remember, they were shepherds. These staffs may have been hundreds of years old. They may have dated all the way back to Abraham's time. And so the idea that they would sprout to life, that doesn't happen, does it? But God says it's going to happen with the one he chooses. And then he says, I'll rid myself of this constant grumbling against you by the Israelites. So Moses gives the instructions, that's verse 6. And they're all placed there, we're told, before the Ark of the Covenant. Verse 8, the next day Moses entered the tent. So Moses is going to go alone. What does he see? Aaron's staff, which represented the tribe of Levi, had not only sprouted, in other words, it didn't produce green, but it budded, blossomed, and produced almonds. So it's not only that it just had a leaf or two, it literally produced fruit. Just imagine that. Well, Moses brings out the staves from the Lord's presence. They looked at them, so that it's not just Moses telling them. They looked at them. Each of the leaders took back his staff. That would include Aaron, and so obviously Aaron is going to be the one that's chosen. And then God tells Moses, he says, put back Aaron's staff in front of the Ark of the Covenant to be kept as a sign to the rebellious. This will put an end to their grumbling against me so that they will not die. So Aaron doesn't get his staff back. By the way, this is the same staff that Aaron would use before Pharaoh. It's the one he threw down that became a snake. The one that that Moses used to stretch over the Red Sea and divided the sea. It goes in the Ark of the Covenant. Here it says before it, but yes, with it. Can you think of what else will be put by the Ark of the Covenant? There's two other things. Well, the showbread goes out on the table outside in the first room. A pot of manna, they're going to keep in the Ark of the Covenant. The tablets, the Ten Commandments, those three things are going to be there. Book of Hebrews, which we're studying in our sermon, it talks about that in chapter 9. It reminds us of these things. Let's quickly end 16 and then we'll be done. Verse 12, the Israelites said to Moses, "We will die, we are lost, we're all lost. Anyone who even comes near the tabernacle of the Lord will die. Are we all going to die?" So what lesson do they learn from all this?
You're gonna die, you go to hell.
Well, but is that what they learn?
No.
I think they learned we're going to die. They haven't quite fit together that it's because of their own lack of faith and their sin. That's why they're going to die. They think they come too close to God, they're going to die.
Well, they don't understand about the complaining and all this stuff, and jealousy.
They hadn't connected the two yet. It goes back to Exodus 20. You remember after God spoke the Ten Commandments from the mountain, you had the trumpet blast. And you remember God had already told the people when the trumpet blast, everybody come up on the mountain, come near to God. Well, the trumpet blast, and what do the people do? They tell Moses, "We can't hear any more from God, we'll die. Moses, we want you to go. You listen, you come back and tell us." That was not what God intended. God intended all the people to be close. But they wanted just Moses. Here they say, we come too close to God, we're going to die. They've totally missed the point that it's because of their own attitudes, their sin. And that's going to set up for the other failures, because we're not done with the people failing. They're going to continue to complain and so forth. Let's quickly end. Chapter 18, we're going to kind of skip over. That's going to be a chapter that's got instructions to the priest. And read that this week. There's some interesting things there. Chapter 19 kind of continues that same idea. Chapter 19 talks about a red heifer. I don't know if you've ever heard of